In June 2016, an apartment in San Diego, California, became the center of a devastating discovery. The case would raise complex questions about trust, violence behind closed doors, and the long pursuit of justice for a life that ended far too soon. Krystal Mitchell was born in 1986 in Pasadena, California, before moving with her family to Vancouver, Washington around the age of 8. She later attended Mountain View High School in Vancouver, where those who knew her remembered her as kind-hearted, uplifting, and always willing to help others. As an adult, Krystal was deeply devoted to her 2 children, placing family at the center of her life. She was known for her thoughtfulness, never missing birthdays, Mother's Day, or meaningful milestones. At 22, Krystal married, hoping to build a stable future for her family. However, that chapter of her life came to an end when the marriage dissolved in 2012. Despite the emotional weight of that transition, she remained focused on providing for her children and creating a better life for them. In 2014, determined to begin again, Krystal relocated to Phoenix, Arizona in search of a fresh start. There, she secured work as a property manager at an apartment complex, a role that reflected her responsible nature and strong work ethic. The move symbolized her desire to rebuild and move forward with purpose. It was at this apartment complex that Krystal met Raymond McLeod, who would later become her boyfriend. McLeod had applied for an apartment at the same property where she worked, bringing their paths together through what appeared to be an ordinary professional interaction that gradually became personal. Through her job, Krystal conducted a credit and background check on Raymond, which did not reveal any felony convictions or prior domestic violence charges. Believing his record to be clean, she had no reason to suspect the history of abuse involving previous spouses that remained hidden from her. Unaware of what lay beneath the surface, Krystal could not have known that this decision would ultimately change everything. On June 10, 2016, a friend of Krystal and her boyfriend returned to the San Diego apartment where the couple had been staying. Upon entering the residence, the friend discovered Krystal unresponsive inside a guest bedroom. Realizing she was not breathing, the friend immediately placed a call to 911. The emergency responders arrived at the apartment but were unable to revive her. The paramedics pronounced Krystal deceased at the scene, leaving behind her 2 children of 5 and 6 years old. The location was an acquaintance's apartment situated in the Allied Gardens neighborhood along Mission Gorge Road. As the investigators began examining the scene, it quickly became clear that Krystal's demise was not from natural causes. The authorities documented bloodstains inside the bedroom as well as in other areas of the apartment, suggesting that the incident extended beyond a single space within the residence. The guest bedroom and nearby areas showed visible signs of a struggle. According to reports from the investigators and later court filings, the evidence pointed to a violent confrontation that took place before her life ended. The disorder throughout the room raised immediate concerns of a criminal act. Further examination revealed that Krystal had suffered multiple injuries consistent with those of someone whose life was taken. These included trauma to her neck area and additional bruising, leading the investigators to determine that violence was the cause of her end. The findings reinforced the conclusion that her life had been deliberately taken. At the time Krystal was found, her boyfriend, Raymond Samuel McLeod Jr., was nowhere to be seen. The authorities learned that he had left the area shortly before her body was discovered. In the aftermath of the case, McLeod became a fugitive, actively sought by law enforcement in connection with her case. He fled the United States, prompting the authorities to believe that he traveled south through Mexico and continued into Central America shortly after her life was ended. As the years passed with McLeod still missing, the search intensified. He was placed on the U.S. Marshals Service's 15 Most Wanted list, signaling the seriousness of the case. A reward of approximately $50,000 was offered in hopes of generating information that could lead to his capture and bring accountability for the crime. After 6 years went by, in 2022, the investigators received an anonymous tip indicating that an individual resembling McLeod was working as an English teacher in Sonsonate, El Salvador. This lead prompted collaboration between the U.S. Marshal Service and the U.S. Embassy, who worked together to verify the information provided. Their investigation confirmed that the ex-Marine, McLeod, was indeed living in Sonsonate and had been teaching English under an assumed name for an extended period. The authorities carefully monitored the situation to ensure a safe apprehension while confirming his identity beyond doubt. In late August 2022, Salvadoran authorities, with the U.S. Marshals present, took McLeod into custody without incident. At the time of his arrest, he acknowledged his true identity to law enforcement, bringing an end to years of searching across international borders. After his arrest, McLeod was deported back to the United States to face charges. He entered a not guilty plea, claiming her end occurred accidentally during consensual intercourse involving choking. In June 2025, a new preliminary hearing was ordered after the prosecutors failed to disclose more than 2,000 pages of discovery. The new hearing will determine whether his case will head to trial because the prosecutors did not turn over evidence that his attorneys claim could exonerate him. McLeod's attorney said that before the preliminary hearing, the prosecutors failed to turn over evidence from Krystal's cell phone and computer, showing that she shared an interest in that type of activity with McLeod. The case has drawn national attention due to surveillance footage showing McLeod grabbing Krystal's throat, conflicting expert opinions regarding intent. The prosecutors argued that on the night before Krystal was found, McLeod and she went to a local bar where McLeod put his hands on Krystal, causing other bar patrons to intervene. The couple was later spotted on surveillance footage at the apartment complex where Krystal lost her life, and McLeod can be seen putting his hand on the victim's throat as the couple entered an elevator. Also, due to the unwavering efforts of Krystal's mother, Josephine Wenzel, a former police detective who was widely credited for sustaining public awareness, encouraging tips, and keeping focus on the pursuit of justice for her daughter. Josephine said the following at the time of his arrest: "Yes, I got him, and he is not going to get away again. He is never going to be released from that jail if I can have something to do with that. I am glad this day came. After 6 years, I was not too sure. I am glad it is here now." He faces 25 years to life in state prison if convicted as charged. In January 2015, hikers in Asturias, Spain, stumbled upon a male body. For years, the man of Somiedo remained unidentified. In January 2015, hikers exploring the remote areas of Somiedo Natural Park in Asturias, northern Spain, discovered a decomposed body along a mountain road. The scene was isolated, far from any nearby towns or settlements, making the discovery both shocking and mysterious. The body's condition immediately suggested long-term neglect or vulnerability. The police unwrapped the body from the blanket and discovered that the decedent was naked and missing one leg, which was determined to be the result of scavenging from animals. The remains were extremely thin and showed clear signs of severe physical disabilities, indicating that the individual had been entirely dependent on others for care. The state of the body revealed a life marked by extreme fragility, and the investigators quickly recognized that this was not the case of an ordinary hiker or visitor. The person had likely endured serious challenges even before his end. No identification documents were recovered from the scene, leaving the authorities unable to determine who the victim was. Without any immediate clues, the deceased man became known in official reports and in the media as the Man of Somiedo. The anonymity of the victim made the case more difficult to investigate and created an unsettling sense of mystery around the circumstances of the demise. Because of the body's condition and the severity of the physical disabilities, early investigators initially suspected that the victim might have been a homeless or transient individual. This assumption complicated the investigation, as the authorities had few leads to follow and no clear indication of how the victim ended up in such a remote location. At the time, it was believed that the man has passed away from a heart attack with no foul play suspected. The lack of identifying information caused the case to stagnate. Despite ongoing inquiries, the Man of Somiedo remained unidentified for years. The investigators were left with a cold case that offered more questions than answers, and the trail of evidence grew colder with each passing year. Years after the discovery in Somiedo, Policia Nacional's UDEV, a specialized crime unit, reopened the investigation. Using advanced forensic techniques, the investigators re-examined fingerprints and other evidence recovered from the scene. These findings ultimately linked the remains to a man named Luis Maria J.C., known by the nickname Luisín. The breakthrough in identification led the authorities to focus on his family. By 2025, a decade after he was discovered, the investigators had tracked down Luisín's siblings, who had been moving between various locations, including the Basque Country. The siblings' mobility had previously complicated efforts to locate them, but persistent investigation eventually brought them into custody. Luisín was born in the early 1970s in Asturias, the child of local parents who cared for him despite his severe congenital disabilities. From birth, he faced immense physical challenges. He could not walk, speak, or feed himself, and his survival depended completely on others. His early life was defined by constant care, and his parents devoted themselves entirely to his needs. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, Luisín remained confined largely to his family home. His conditions left him unable to interact with the world in ways most people take for granted. He relied on caregivers for every aspect of daily life, from eating and bathing to mobility. His dependence made him highly vulnerable, but his parents' presence offered some stability and protection. After the passing of his parents, responsibility for Luisín shifted to his siblings. Legally, they became his primary caretakers, overseeing every part of his life. The family's ability to provide for him relied heavily on a disability pension from the Spanish government. This pension was essential, not only for his care, but for his very survival, covering medical needs, food, and other necessities. Luisín's world was one of near total isolation. Being both blind and deaf, he could not communicate in the conventional sense, and his interactions were limited to the few family members who cared for him. He had no access to the broader world, and his understanding of life outside the home was minimal. The combination of his disabilities and dependence made him entirely at the mercy of those around him. Despite the protective environment provided by his family, Luisín remained unaware that his circumstances were about to change dramatically. His siblings, Enrique and Enriqueta J.C., were arrested after confessing the identity of the deceased. They admitted to hiding the crime of Luisín for years, acknowledging that they had done so to continue collecting his disability pension. Their confession revealed the full extent of the deception and the calculated nature of their actions. According to the investigators, after Luisín was malnourished and lost his life, his siblings failed to report his demise. Instead of notifying the authorities, they continued to accept payments meant to support his care. They confessed that Luisín had been unwell for several days before his end, but they did not call an ambulance for fear that the hospital would fail to save him, leading to his demise being registered, and thus cutting off government deposits. Instead, Enrique and Enriqueta neglected him, eventually causing Luisín's end from starvation. Over time, the amount they collected may have totaled around 300,000 euros or more, highlighting the financial motive behind their concealment. To conceal the crime, Enrique and Enriqueta transported Luisín's body and left it in the remote area of Somiedo, where the hikers later discovered it. The disposal of the remains in such an isolated location delayed identification and allowed the siblings to continue benefiting from the pension for many years without detection. Following their arrest, the siblings faced multiple charges, including slaying by inaction, identity fraud, failure to report a crime, and social security fraud involving over 300,000 euros. The case exposed a chilling combination of neglect and financial exploitation, and it became one of the most disturbing examples of abuse against a vulnerable individual in recent Spanish criminal history. In June 2006, a man was fatally shot in Riverside County, California. The case remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades. Raymond Cardenas was born in 1985. He spent his young adult life living in Highgrove in Riverside County, California. In the early hours of June 18, 2006, the deputies were dispatched to a residence in the 1000 block of Citrus Street. The call came in around 1:26 a.m., reporting a man suffering from major injuries. The quiet night in Riverside County would soon be shattered by the unfolding tragedy. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered 21-year-old Raymond lying with gunshot wounds. Despite immediate efforts, Raymond was pronounced deceased at the scene, marking a sudden and violent end to his young life. The investigators later pieced together the events leading to Raymond's demise. They determined that he had been shot a short distance from the residence and had attempted to escape the attack. In a desperate bid for help, he ran to a nearby home, only to collapse before reaching safety. The Riverside Sheriff's Central Unit quickly took over the investigation. The authorities worked to identify potential suspects and reconstruct the circumstances that led to the fatal shooting. Every detail became crucial in the effort to bring justice for Raymond. Despite their efforts, the investigation faced challenges. At the time, the authorities stated that there was not enough evidence to file charges against a suspect. The lack of conclusive leads left the case unresolved, frustrating both law enforcement and the victim's family. Ultimately, the investigation stalled, and the case went cold. Nearly 2 decades later, the investigation was revived in August 2025. The Riverside County Sheriff's Office launched a renewed effort as part of its ongoing review of unsolved cases, aiming to bring closure to long-cold investigations. The detectives assigned to the Central Unit's cold case team re-examined the original evidence. They conducted additional investigative work, reviewing details that had previously gone unnoticed. This renewed scrutiny ultimately led to the development of what the authorities described as sufficient evidence to move forward with charges. The investigators were able to identify a suspect with enough supporting evidence to warrant legal action. The suspect, Anthony Silvas Mira, was 51 years old at the time of his arrest and living in the Spring Valley area of San Diego County. Law enforcement arrested Miera without incident on December 26, 2025, ending a long period of uncertainty surrounding the case. Miera had been identified early in the original investigation as a potential suspect, but the prosecutors had previously refrained from proceeding due to insufficient evidence. The cold case review and the additional investigative work changed that, allowing the authorities to formally charge him with ending the life of Raymond. Following his arrest, Miera was booked into the Robert Presley Detention Center in Riverside. He is being held on a $1 million bail while the legal case moves forward, marking the first concrete step toward accountability for a crime that had remained unresolved for nearly 2 decades. This investigation is currently ongoing, and no further information will be released at this time. If anyone has information regarding this investigation, they are encouraged to call lead investigator Dan Brown of the Central Unit at 951-955-2777. The story of Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel cases remain a chilling tale of violence, mystery, and the enduring quest for answers in one of history's most infamous unsolved cases. Between 1888 and 1891, a series of tragic cases gripped the Whitechapel district in London's East End. In total, 11 women lost their lives under suspicious circumstances, prompting a police investigation that became known as the Whitechapel Crimes. The violence and mystery surrounding these cases created widespread fear among residents and attracted national attention. 7 of the victims suffered a fatal slash to the throat, a grim signature that suggested a calculated and determined perpetrator. In 4 of these cases, the bodies were further mutilated after their end, a detail that horrified the investigators and the public alike. The level of brutality marked the crimes as extraordinary and particularly disturbing for the time. 5 of the cases, occurring between August and November 1888, exhibited such clear similarities that the authorities generally agreed that they were the work of a single serial offender. This unknown figure became infamously known as Jack the Ripper, whose identity remained elusive despite the intense efforts of the police. Despite a thorough investigation involving numerous officers, informants, and public appeals for information, the Ripper was never caught. The case remained officially unsolved, leaving the community in fear and the authorities frustrated by their inability to bring the perpetrator to justice. Years later, previously undiscovered documents shed new light on the investigation. These records revealed that some police officials had suspected a man referred to as Aaron Kosminski, noting him as a potential link to the violent cases. Aaron Kosminski was born on September 11, 1865 in Congress, Poland, which was then part of the Russian Empire. In the 1880s, he moved to England with his family, seeking a new life amidst the challenges of migration. Settling in Whitechapel, a poor and overcrowded district of London, he took up work intermittently as a hairdresser, navigating the harsh realities of urban life. From at least the late 1880s, Aaron began to display signs of severe mental illness. He reported hearing voices, experienced intense paranoia, and frequently refused food offered by others. These troubling behaviors marked the early stages of a troubled mind and drew the attention of family and authorities alike. His condition deteriorated to the point where institutional care became necessary. Aaron was admitted to multiple asylums, where medical staff attempted to manage his symptoms and protect both him and the public. His life, until that point, had been relatively ordinary, shaped by work and family in the Whitechapel. Despite his struggles, Aaron did not realize that the path he was on could lead to events that would shock the community. The documents suggested that Kosminski had drawn official attention long before the public would hear of him. Handwritten notes from another investigator indicated that Kosminski had been observed by the police and eventually sent to an asylum. In recent years, researchers have attempted to shed new light on the mystery of Jack the Ripper. Among them, British author Russell Edwards has claimed to identify Aaron Kosminski as the serial offender responsible for the Whitechapel cases. His research focused on a shawl reportedly discovered near one of the victims in 1888, which he argued could hold crucial genetic evidence. According to Edwards, DNA extracted from the shawl connected both the victim and Kosminski through their descendants. If accurate, this evidence would provide a direct link between the perpetrator and one of the most infamous crimes in London's history. The claim attracted considerable attention, offering a possible breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for over a century. However, the DNA evidence has been widely disputed within the scientific and investigative communities. Experts have raised concerns about the chain of custody, noting that the shawl had passed through numerous hands over more than a century, increasing the risk of contamination or misidentification. Additionally, some scientists questioned the reliability of the testing methods used on the material. They emphasized that DNA analysis under such circumstances cannot provide absolute certainty, particularly when the evidence is as old and fragile as a 19th century artifact. These doubts have cast significant skepticism on the claim that Kosminski was definitively the Ripper. No official law enforcement authority has formally confirmed Kosminski as the perpetrator of the Whitechapel cases. Kosminski passed away on March 24, 1919 from gangrene at the age of 53. Russell tried unsuccessfully to get permission to exhume Aaron Kosminski's body in 2012 before the publication of his book, and again in 2016. In 2025, it was reported that Edwards and his legal team were seeking a new inquest for a third time. This aim has been supported by living descendants of Catherine Eddowes, one of the victims, and one relation of Aaron Kosminski. While the DNA research has sparked renewed public interest and debate, it has not changed the official status of the case. The identity of Jack the Ripper remains unresolved, leaving historians and investigators to continue examining both old and new evidence. Ultimately, the possibility that Kosminski may have been responsible highlights the enduring fascination with the Whitechapel cases. Despite modern scientific tools and investigative techniques, the case continues to captivate the imagination, illustrating how some cases can remain a haunting mystery across generations.